Hey guys, I'm Dave and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today, we're going to rebuild a pneumatic gun. Pneumatic guns are pretty simple to maintain, little oil now and then, and they're good to go. But sometimes, this happens. Not a good sound. It's not really a big deal, there's just a bad seal in there somewhere. The easiest thing to do is to order a rebuild kit from the manufacturer. Just make sure you use the right model number and type and maybe even the serial number and manufacturer's date. They can get kind of specific. Now, there's a lot of little parts, but it's a pretty simple job. Let's take a look and see how easy it is to actually rebuild a gun and get back in business. I'm rebuilding a Porta-Cable narrow crown staple gun, and to do that I ordered a rebuild kit from Porta-Cable. Now, most manufacturers offer rebuild kits for their gun. Just make sure you order the correct kit for your particular gun. And one other thing, they're not always, well, cheap. I started off by opening the rebuild kit and sorting out all the items. In this case, there's a page of instructions, a small bag of O-rings, another bag of trigger parts, a bumper, gasket, and seal, 2 Allen wrenches, a needle to help remove old O-rings, and a small tube of lubricant. The next step was to remove the top cap. Then I could ease out the cylinder, driver, and the rest of the guts of the gun. After wiping all the parts down and sorting the new O-rings from the kit, it was time to start removing the old parts and replacing them with the new ones. I tried my best to work in a logical sequence, despite the extremely vague directions and the fact that I haven't done this in years. I started with the cylinder that has 3 rings that need replacing. Here you can see how I eased the needle under the old O-ring to get it out of the groove that it's set in. I placed a small bead of lube on each groove before seating the new ring. Once all 3 O-rings were replaced, I inserted the new bumper into the body, seated the driver into the cylinder, and inserted the cylinder into the body. Make sure the driver is aligned with the base of the gun though. In this case, the driver has kind of a T-shaped body and will only go in one way. So take your time and line things up carefully. Now it's time to rebuild the cap. After knocking out the valve piston and wiping down the parts, I replaced the small cap, the valve seal, and the O-rings. This was a little tricky for me since I had recently replaced the cap as an assembly and a few of these parts were missing. I never thought to look for missing parts when it's sold as a unit. That was probably the first problem with my gun. I figured out what went where and reassembled the cap and set the gasket in place. I can now replace the 4 screws that hold the top cap and secure the body of the tool. To rebuild the trigger, I began by pulling the pin that holds it, and then removed the trigger and spring underneath. I used a small wrench to unscrew the valve guide and removed it and the other parts of the trigger mechanism. This is where I found my second problem. The seal inside the trigger had dried out and split into a few pieces. After some juggling and head scratching, I figured out the correct order to rebuild the trigger and got all 6 of those tiny pieces in place and back into the housing. The last step here was to reset the trigger and its spring, seat the pin, and lock it in place with the retainer. There's nothing left to do but give it a test run. I inserted a small clip of staples, attached my air hose, and if all went well, all told, I spent less than an hour rebuilding this gun, and that includes setting up the cameras and lights and all that fun stuff.
It's a pretty simple process. I think the directions had 5 whole steps. I like to be able to take care of my own tools and repair them when necessary. Occasionally I need to send something out, and I talked to my local guy and he told me he's 3 months out. I need that staple gun to finish a job I'm working on. Took about 3 days for the parts to come from the vendor, and like I said, maybe less than an hour to put it together. Now I'm ready to go. Well, this was a porta-cable staple gun. Most pneumatic guns are pretty basic across the board. They all have similar rebuild kits available for them. I haven't really messed with the battery-operated guns. I only have one, and I hope not to have to deal with that for a while. I have no idea what's involved in those guys. But when the time comes, I'll probably fix my own. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Is there something I could have done different, easier? Drop in the notes below. I'm also curious to know what kind of tools you will rebuild on your own and what kind you just got to send out to the professionals. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe share it with a friend and give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, maybe hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you get notified each time I put out a new video. As usual, I don't have a clue what's coming up next, but I'm sure it'll be something interesting. I hope. With that said, guys, have a great day. Take care. We'll see you soon.